you for accepting our invitation. Let me apologize to everyone out there that was expecting for this to be a live talk. We had some technical issues that we were not able to overcome. We'll post this conversation and hopefully you'll enjoy it just as much. So moving on to our guests, thank you Franz, Haley, Rob, and Beatriz for accepting our invitation to be here. This is May's last climate talk about wine in a changing climate. And I hope everyone out there is going back to their sort of normal life, whatever that means, slowly and safely. Now, before I introduce today's topic, let me take this opportunity to briefly introduce Porto Protocol. We were born out of the climate change leadership events that took place in Porto in 2018 and 2019 in Porto, as a commitment made by most of its participants to do more for climate world and the wine value chain. We are on a quest to build a network of change makers and climate solutions. This is our mission and our way of shaping a collaborative and collective approach to better respond to climate change. And the reason why is that we firmly believe that by sharing experiences, solutions, lessons, and challenges, we can tackle this emergently more promptly and efficiently. So this is our invitation for you to join us and share with us everything. Moving towards our talk, in this virtual roundtable spread across the world, we have different people that have embraced their family business and passion. They will be sharing with us what led them to follow their family footsteps. And though they represent wine, most of all, they represent a generation where action on climate and on acting sustainably became a question of survival. Beatriz Machado, wine director at the Yeatman Hotel, will be moderating this debate. And before I pass on the word to her, let me introduce each of our guests. So we have from Germany, we have Franz Werheimer from Dr. Werheim Winery, and I hope I said it as well as I could. From the US, we have Haley Duncan from Silver Oak Cellars, and from Portugal, we have Rob Symington from Symington Family Estates. So without no further ado, because we have waited so long, Beatriz, I pass on the words to you. Thank you all, and I'll disappear for now. Good luck.
Thank you, Marta. And thank you. When Porto Protocol invited me to moderate this, I immediately thought, this is about new generation, so we should be able to do a talk or to share our experiences. And although we have today 3 different wine regions in the world represented, we also have different companies with different structures, different volumes. And what I wanted to do today is to hear 3 solutions, 3 take-home messages of things that you would do in your daily life, in your own company, that you feel that are doing something different to leave your companies to a future generation. So let's try to have a conversation and share solutions. So sometimes when I really focus on the issue and talk about the issue over, let's just share solutions, ways that we do in our everyday lives. What do you think? Haley.
Hi there. So I am the Safety and Sustainability Manager for Silver Oak, and I've been working with my family for almost 6 years. So it's been, it's gone by really quickly, and we've done a lot in those 6 years that I've been a part of the family business. And I would say that the most important thing is to measure. If a winery is interested in understanding their footprint, that it doesn't mean anything to make those changes if you can't measure, a baseline and where you were before. So one of the things that we've prioritized this year is performing a detailed greenhouse gas inventory of all of our business operations for Silver Oak and Toomey. And this is going to help us prioritize what solutions we will tackle in the future, because now we understand what our biggest emitters are. And the data was a little surprising. It wasn't what you would think. You know, one of our top emitters is just the way that we ship wine. And that's a really tough thing to tackle, is how we get our product to consumers. When
this theme started to become a main topic for Silver Oak, sustainability, and when was Silver Oak identified? When did Silver Oak identify this as a priority?
Sure. Yeah. So we've been very active in this arena for a long time, but it didn't really become well known to the public what we were doing and the extent of what we were doing until we started the design and construction for our new facility in the Alexander Valley. Mm-hmm. So, you know, our goal when I first started was to build a new facility where we could make our Alexander Valley Cabernet and kind of move from our old facility, which we were in for a long time, and make something better. And it was around the time that my uncle David, who runs the winery with my dad, he was very passionate about pursuing green building certifications and, you know, trying to design a winery that had never been done before, essentially. And he wanted every aspect of the winery to touch on sustainability in some way. And so we went for LEED Platinum certification and also Living Building Challenge certification.
To an already existing building? Right?
To a new building.
To a new building, okay.
It was a new project. And so that was my role for the first 5 years. I was project manager. And it was my job to make sure that we actually achieved those certifications. And they were extremely difficult. We're one of, I think, 25 buildings in the world that have living certification. And there's a whole lot to talk about there, but I think that is when our role in sustainability really became known to the public, because we had achieved something that was so unique and special. And then moving forward, we've gotten more into the greenhouse gases and talking about that. But originally it really was like, how can we build something that is the most sustainable version of a winery?
What are the challenges that you face in California? Is it water? Is it heat? What kind of is dramatic changes in terms of climate? What would you say are the main challenges that you're facing this time?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are challenges, but the biggest is water. There's a lot of concern over water. We were in a drought for a very long time. And so I think water shortage is on everyone's mind. And even though that doesn't mean that we couldn't have a problem in the next 5, 10, 20 years. So in terms of the new winery, we knew that we needed to develop a solution that recycled as much water as possible and used as little water as possible. So we became one of the first wineries to actually reuse recycled water in the cellar. Mm-hmm. So we have 2 hoses, purple hoses and white hoses. So the purple hoses are recycled water, and we can use this water for so many different tasks in the cellar that just don't require potable water. And so that's one way we've been able to reduce our water usage by about 40%. But so yeah, overall, I would say water is the biggest concern in California.
Do you guys feel free to jump into the conversation if you would like to ask Ailey any question? I'm just curious about what in terms of financially to start investing in making all these changes and building this LEED Platinum building. I mean, was it a lot of people that said, you know, maybe it won't pay off and it's a lot of investment and, you know, this is not really an issue? Or it was something that you were really, at Silver Oak, you were really sensitive and you say, no, this is the path that we definitely have to take to be, you know, more effective or more efficient?
Yeah, I don't think we would have achieved either certification if we didn't have full support from my family and from, you know, the decision makers. These are certifications that you fall into and that you can achieve in the last 6 months of construction. These are things that we needed to plan for 2 years before we even broke ground. So we definitely had, you know, I personally had a lot of support from my family and the management team to pursue this. So it was very important to us. And I think the challenge is continuing that priority and making safety and sustainability a priority. And, you know, these are things that I feel like can easily be put on the back burner because people can get so caught up in their regular, you know, day-to-day tasks.
Yeah.
But I think the challenge, you know, for everyone is just making sure that these ideas are always brought to the forefront and never put on the back burner. And, you know, continuing to budget for those types of projects is so important in the future.
I'm going to take this topic and move it on to Rob. Rob, you are now based in Portugal. Tell us a bit about your company and all the generations behind Symington. We're moving from California into mountain viticulture in the Douro Valley. Tell us a bit about your context.
Thanks, Beatriz. Well, we're neighbors, as you know, so we're in the same town right now. I'm the 5th generation of my family to be based in Portugal, producing wine and port in the Douro Valley, as you can see behind me. So the first Symington came out from Scotland in 1882, I think, to escape the bad weather, perhaps. He was only 19.
And blame him.
Well, let's thank him. And here we are today in 2020 with 10 members of my family actively working side by side in the business across the 4th and now 5th generation. So we're an independent family business. We're a portfolio company, so we produce 4 labels as well. And yeah, we have a lot to share on our commitment to this area. We're not perfect, and I don't think any organization is, but we're trying as hard as we can to be as ambitious as we can in this area.
So when you joined the company 18 months ago, what were the challenges that, I mean, because you could see, you know, the company from, obviously you've seen opportunities and challenges. I mean, and what would you say would be what would you like to change in the company or evolve? And what would you what would be the trademark that you would like to leave to the company for the future generation?
Well, it's a good question. When I joined 3 years ago, and I'd been in London running my own business, working in startups, not in wine at all. And from the outside, my fear was that I was going to be joining quite a traditional company. You know, it's been around for 137 years. Maybe it'll be like going back to the 1980s. And I was very relieved that I joined a very forward-thinking organization. We are traditional in some ways, and you know, some traditions are worth maintaining. But I joined a company where people had been doing research into climate change in the vineyard for at least 20 years, where there was already a project underway to measure our entire carbon footprint. And so I was really pushing at an open door. For me, one of the kind of important criteria was that I was going to be able to work in this area. I love wine, I love talking about wine and promoting wine, but I also wanted to be able to use this opportunity to work on what I believe is one of the most important, if not the most important issue for our generation. So I think I'm very lucky because the benefit of a family business, especially one like ours, is that if you're united and you have a long-term vision, which is kind of natural for a family business, you can take decisions that other companies maybe can't because they have different pressures. So, I mean, there are 10 of us, so sometimes consensus is hard.
Of course.
But, you know, I think you get to a better decision in the end when you have a lot of voices in the room. So I don't know if that answers your question.
When I was asking Ailey about resistance when you're changing to a new reality, towards sustainability and getting that printed in the DNA of a company. I mean, can you share something that your company is doing to actually engage everyone on that theme?
Sure. I think this is just so important. Obviously, as a Symington, I guess I can push for things that maybe what some of my colleagues who aren't family members can't. So I think that's an important note. But ultimately, this is about culture change, which I think is what you're asking about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so, okay, we want to change our systems, our ways of working, but first, and at the same time, we need to change behaviors. And actually, globally, it's the same challenge, isn't it? It's culture and systems. So one of the first things we did was we organized the senior managers meeting a few years ago with all of the senior managers in our company, about 45 people. And the theme was sustainability. And I invited two quite provocative speakers to come and shake things up. And so it was one of the excellent R&D managers from Torres in Spain, who is very strong on a lot of this stuff. And it was the B Corp country manager for Portugal. Now, B Corporation, for people who don't know, is a certification for a company, any company, not just wine. And it's like if fair trade is a stamp of approval for a product, B Corp is like that for a whole company. And I just thought we could, have some outside perspectives and shake things up a bit. And actually, Rupert Symington, my cousin and the CEO, when he heard these two talks, specifically the B Corp one, he said, "Rob, this is fantastic. We already have these values. We're already trying to do a lot of this stuff. Let's pursue this certification." And doing company in Portugal, there are only about 30 in the world, was a real statement of intent. And inside the company, it changed the way people thought about what we were as an organization. So I think that was a powerful step.
When obviously you have workers that have been, around for a long time, how were they, how they took this change? Because obviously this will have an impact in to produce wine. I mean, were they resistant, or were you able to share like a broad, bigger message that this was going to be something that would be good?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated issue, but I would start by saying that this is not Rob arriving with all the good ideas and telling everyone what to do.
You're the new generation.
Yeah, I think we can bring some of that energy, and people see us maybe young. Yeah. But honestly, we're a medium-sized company, but we have a lot of people who've been here for 30, 35 years. Last year, we had a picnic. We all went away to the hills and had a picnic, and we ran a competition of sustainability ideas. And I cannot tell you the amount of fantastic ideas that came from the people in every aspect of our business. And what it really showed me was like, wow, people are really aware, they really care, and they're really proud to be working at a company that is listening and wants to implement their ideas. So our biggest challenge is we have too many ideas from everyone.
Great. And moving, I will take this to move to Franz, who I met years ago. I was tasting in Germany for Mundus Vini, and the last day, which was pouring rain, a good friend, Professor Huli Fischer, took me to his winery, and I was impressed because it was the first time that I saw a tasting room that had different types of soils, and when you tasted the wines, you could really relate the differences between the soils. And soil, sometimes we forget, but it has a massive impact on the development of grapevine. If we look into the structure of the grapevine, the majority is actually in the soil. And that actually opened my eyes to a different reality. Instead of just looking to the fruit and therefore the wine. And it was funny because when Porto Protocol was sharing the speakers, I said, I think I know Franz. I think I was in this winery some years ago. But Holy Fisher took me there because they were quite disruptive back then, because they were engaged in the biodynamic, and it was a completely different philosophy. So that started with your father, Franz.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Beatrice, for introducing me. I'm glad that you remembered that I could impress you a little bit and show you something of what we do. Indeed, the idea of terroir is very important to us. Indeed, my father was one of the first who started to label our wines with the single soil. In each category, different wines that grow on different soils. We have a very unique situation here in Birkweiler, which is southwest of Germany in the Pfalz, right in front of the forest, which you can see behind me. It's a little mountain, and basically the earth plates shifted a little bit, and that's why different earth layers came to the surface, and that's why we have that possibility with those different terroirs. We are a family winery. We focus on high quality wines. We are a member of the VDP, and since 2006 we started to work organically, and now we are also certified biodynamic by the Respect Group.
So, coming from, from California to cool climate, Pfalz, what are the challenges that you're facing this recent vintage?
I think the challenges are multi-layered. Of course, we have more extreme weather situations, which is certainly a challenge. We don't necessarily have the problem that the water shortage is extreme. For example, in this year, we have had quite a lot of rain during the winter time, and then the weather changed a little bit to dry period, but it started to rain again, and we are quite happy with the situation right now. But what we see is that the rain comes more concentrated. We still have about the same amount of water in a year, but of course, especially in the ripening period, it can be tough. If you look at vintages like 2018, that was also very dry for us. Well,
so of course, when you got to the company, I mean, there was already a willing, of your father's generation to move into organic and be more sustainable and be more aware of the terroir. What are the challenges that you, as the new generation, you would like to implement in your company and leave to a future generation?
Well, the basic idea why my father started to work organic was to have a more pure starting product to make a wine from. His idea was quality. We need the purest fruit that we can get, and that will increase our quality. I think now we live in a generation where it's not enough to make a great wine or to have a great wine. Our wines now need to show their heritage, and we also need to consider the circumstances how we make our wines. I mean, I'm sure there's many products in the world that and that they are great products, but if they would know how those products are manufactured or how they are created, and then the people would probably reconsider to buy those products. And I think that's everybody has that responsibility nowadays a little bit, and we need to be aware of our responsibility, especially in the agricultural industry.
So the other day we brought a topic about sustainable consumers. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we think of ourselves as sustainable consumers, but we tend to consume more and more every time. What would you say it is the definition of a sustainable consumer? Rob, you can jump into.
You want me to?
Yes.
Sure, go ahead. I'll give my opinion as well.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking before with Franz. I mean, we agreed that that's almost a contradiction, right? Sustainability and consumption. So I guess there's, like Franz is saying, there's more sustainable products and there's less sustainable ones. And what you see is some consumers in some markets are now favoritizing products that seem to be or are more sustainable. I mean, the B Corp movement talks about voting with your money. So like when you're purchasing a product, you're making a choice and you're voting for one company and one brand over another. And what they're saying to their message on their channels, on their platforms is vote with your dollars and sort of support the solution, not the problem. But, you know, it's not black and white because every single, like I said earlier, every single one of us has a negative footprint. You can't operate in the world without doing that. I love Patagonia's message. If you go on the Patagonia website, they're one of the founding B Corps in the US. And they say, look, on their about page, we know we are part of the problem. We are using our resources to do the most we can within our sphere of activity to try and be part of the solution. And I think it's really refreshing to see a brand say like, yeah, we're trying to clean up our mess.
Yes, that's really cool. Are you able to, Ailey, are you able to communicate, you know, in your label, the measurements that everything that you're doing, you know, in the vineyard, in the winery? I mean, does a consumer realize when they're buying a Silver Oak bottle, everything that is behind it?
Yeah, so we're a little different because there are a lot of certifications that wineries in our area can, and a lot of wineries do that. But for us, we would much rather educate consumers through different types of platforms, whether they're visiting the winery, the tasting room, if they're looking on our website, if they're reading our blogs. That's the way that we communicate to our customers what we're doing in terms of sustainability. And we feel like, you know, Silver Oak stands on its own. You know, we've been around for a long time. People recognize our bottle and our brand. And that's something that, you know, we don't really want to change at this point.
Yeah. So you are in Oakville and Alexander Valley, and of course your neighbors always take good care of their vineyards. But, you know, sometimes, for example, in the Douro, and that has been a recent issue, is whenever you're taking care of a vineyard in a certain way, but your neighbors are not engaged in the same reality, and of course it's costly to treat the vineyard, and so what would you think would be the solution, you know, in terms of, you know, the Douro region or the mountain viticulture, to be able to create an awareness within your neighbors to be engaged in the same way that you are?
Yeah, I think just when we first opened our new facility, there was a lot of interest from other wineries to come learn about what we did. And so we actively I gave a lot of tours personally to wineries in our region. And we would basically give them a behind the scenes look, you know, tours that could last, you know, with guests. We use so much new technology in this winery that we felt it really important to share the technology and share the lessons learned. So in that sense, in that specific facility, we've done a lot of education around, with tours. And we've also given tours to people who aren't necessarily in the industry, in the wine industry, but who are engineers, who are
so, you know, people really want to see everything. And as you were saying about, it's all about measurements and, you know, monitoring everything that you do. So that is, so you feel like you are being disruptive and creating a new trend in the region to actually implement everything that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, this facility was sharing the lessons learned with other wineries. And I feel like we've done that pretty well. You know, we're not, we don't frame it as like we're telling people what they should be doing and what other wineries should be doing, but more like, you know, this is what we did. We did the best that we could. We think we did it pretty well, and we want to share it with you guys. That's kind of how we look at it.
Rob, would you like to have a LEED Platinum wine?
We're working on one, but unfortunately it's only gold. The design is only gold. I thought that was because we weren't using an existing building, and that was what you had to do to be platinum, but based on Haley's example, we must have fallen down somewhere else, I'm afraid.
How about you, friends? There is something, is there something that would be in the path for the future, or because we're talking about different realities, just so everyone that is listening to us will have an idea of, you know, the dimension of the company. Could you please just share the volume in terms of wine that you produce, so they will have an idea of?
Of course. The dimension, I think, is there's a big difference between the wineries. We produce around 100,000 bottles of wine. I'm not just, let's say, leading the winery with my father, but I'm also the enologist. You know, we are, compared to your companies, we are probably a very small family
Your
winery.
boutique, your boutique.
Exactly, but we focus on what we can do best, and we focus on quality. And I think that's our niche also. There's certain things that we can probably do more easily. I'm not sure if we could reach a platinum certification, but in terms of working certified by within the family, of course we have it's a little bit easier to change, and we can change a little bit faster just because of the size of our company. And I think that's also a good thing, that we can make very fast decision and adapt very, very fast in each year, especially in those changing years, and make the best out of every vintage.
Oh, how about you, Ailey? How can you tell us the dimension in terms of volume?
Sure.
Of Silver Oak?
Yeah, so Silver Oak makes about 100,000 cases a year, and we've maintained that production level for a little while now. You know, we don't see that as growing exponentially at all in the next few years. Our whole thing is just steady and incremental growth at this point. But yeah, 100,000 cases a year.
Cool. Rob?
Yeah, so we produce roughly 1.8 million cases a year. We're responsible for purchasing almost a fifth of the grapes in the Douro Valley. So we have a big social and environmental footprint in the area. We've been buying off 1,000 grape farmers, many of whom my grandfather bought from their grandfather. And so, you know, we're not going to solve these problems by ourselves, but we see we as much as we can.
I was just asking Ellie about, you know, how can you engage your neighbors into, you know, what you're doing, because, you know, if you have a disease and if your neighbor doesn't treat the disease, then will, you know, it will have an impact on your production. How what is your strategy? Or what would you say would be the solution?
Well, what's interesting is in the Douro, increasingly farmers, for everyone who's watching, the Douro is made up of 21,000 small growers. The average area of each farmer is less than 2.5 hectares. So it's really community viticulture, you know, a lot of wisdom and tradition, but it's also kind of semi-professional. So a lot of people will have another job and they'll have some vineyard. But what's interesting, Beatrice, is that in the Douro, increasingly, you can't get subsidies or supports unless you conform to various standards. Sativa is the framework that everyone uses. So if you want support for replanting, you need to be certified for sustainable viticulture. Mm-hmm. It's called integrated production management. It's not as strong as organic, but it's pretty good. We have a dedicated manager who works with our population of farmers to transmit best practice, and specifically not just best practice to how to look after your vineyard, but also sustainability measures. I think the Douro probably is lacking a sustainability framework across the region. In the Alentejo, they have one.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
In the Alentejo, they have one, and I think that would probably be a powerful step.
So, just so you know, Rob, I mean, the strength is Douro Valley, but they recently acquired also property in the Alentejo. So, what would you say is the big difference in versus Douro Valley?
Well, I think one of the big challenges with the Douro is that we are in one of the most expensive regions to farm grapes in the world because of the mountainous terrain. Mm-hmm. So we already have cost of production per kilo, which can be up to 8 times that of high production New World vineyards. And so by default, and the reason for that is because you can't mechanize as easily as you can. So it's a hard sell to say you now need to add even more costs to your farming in order to be sustainable. The Alentejo is not so hilly, so you can be more efficient down there and potentially more sustainable. I would say that was probably the main difference. I mean, we farm the largest area of organic vineyard in the Douro. And the reason we can do it where we are doing is up in the Villarissa Valley in the east of the region. It's very flat. So we're able mm-hmm. to do things that we can't do on these, as you can see behind me, these terraces. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes. Franz, do you have any experience in Mosul?
Not in Mosul, but I did my apprenticeship at the Naha. Mm-hmm. They are also very famous for their steep slopes.
Yes, for mountain viticulture. And, do you think it would be possible to implement, all the practices that you're doing? And they have a lot of boutique wineries as well.
Yes, that's very true. Certainly, I think so. There's good examples. For example, in our Respect Biodone certification, there's Clemens Busch Winery, which is from the Mosel. I'm sure they are having, they're just having more vineyard hours, but at the end they have to focus on what's best. And if they focus on premium wines, they are able to accomplish that challenge. I'm not sure if you are able, as Rob mentioned, I'm not sure if you're able to produce like a vast amount of wine in those areas. But it is possible to engage in organic or biodynamic farming in those areas. And there's perfect examples who do so.
I think that's the key. One of the challenges we have in the Douro is we need to be a premium wine and port producing region. We can't compete on brands in supermarkets because we just simply have a completely different cost reality.
Yeah. And of course, and Ailey would argue that probably, in Napa, the cost of the land is completely different as well. So we have labor, we have land, and then we have all this. Sometimes when we implement more sustainable practices that we're able to produce, and it obviously sustainability comes in different factors, and social and economical and environmental. So it is tricky, but is this really the path? I mean, is this the only way to actually move forward?
You mean sustainability, or you
yes.
mean? Well, I mean, the word sustainability future. So it is hard to argue, you know, that wouldn't be a way to do so. Even though we are certified organic and biodynamic, I'm not sure if you necessarily have to be certified to work sustainable. Unfortunately, I think there's many companies in the world that claim to be sustainable without actually being it. So,
yeah, if I was to start producing wine, I have a vineyard that has been in my family, but no one really, you know, got into wine production. We sell grapes to another company. What would you say? I said, I want to develop this business. I want to create my own label, but I want to be small. I want to be boutique. This is, as Rob was saying, you know, this is more like a hobby. Maybe in the future, you know, I would be, you know, just having this as my job. What would you say to me? I mean, to convert me to biodynamic practices, and what would you say would be the main advantage? I said, Beatrice, you really have to do this because
first of all, I wouldn't
okay.
That would be the first step to convince you. The second point would be to actually tell you our experience, what we did. We came from the idea of quality to change to organic, and then going to biodynamic was just the next step, basically. But now we realize that it's also a very great advantage when coping with climate change, because by working in this biodynamic, more sustainable way, you have a more harmonious, harmonious or more balanced vineyard, which prepares you for more extreme weather situations, and also which creates a closer connection between the physiological ripeness and the sugar ripeness, because that's one of the main issues that we have in the wine world, with more heat. And sometimes, especially for Riesling, this can be a big challenge when you have a level of sugar already that you need to pick the grapes, but the level of physiological ripeness is not quite there yet. And I think that's the strongest argument for working in a biodynamic way, that you just have that balanced vineyard that takes out a little bit of the fast energy, and that creates an atmosphere with a low sugar component.
What about you, Ailey? Imagine that you were speaking to Rob and say, why? I mean, if you have that amount of production, I mean, you really have to do this. What would you say? Which practice would you say, you know, would you suggest to Rob to inspire him to move forward and take another step?
In terms of vineyards or just in general?
In terms of, if he's now working on a LEED gold building, or a practice that you feel that you have been disruptive in terms of in the wine industry, what would you suggest Rob to do? Even though he has, you know, he mentioned that he's in a region which is quite tricky to work with, and he already implemented several strategies to be more sustainable. What would you suggest him to do?
Well, it sounds like you guys are on the right track for various certifications. And I think throughout my whole experience with these different green building certifications and vineyard certifications to a somewhat lesser degree, is just how important they really are. They set a framework that a winery can follow. They're usually pretty comprehensive. I mean, you probably know that the LEED certification is not simple. There's a lot of measures that you have to meet and a lot of tracking that you have to do. And so I would also say that it's a great way to communicate your commitment to your customers, because you know, there's some understanding that if you've taken the time to pursue certification and achieve it, that, you know, you're being held to a certain standard that you might not be held to if you pursued some of these things on your own. So that's not to say that, you know, you couldn't incorporate certain practices without becoming certified, but I do believe that certifications offer a much more robust way for a company to show that they're serious about sustainability.
When I was in graduate school at UC Davis, I finished just before the first the LEED Platinum winery was built, and it's funny because it's a winery that has the range, which would be able to produce either volume or small batches. So it goes from boutique into massive production, and I remembered of seeing the winery and thinking that was basically the life proof of everything that I learned in class with Roger Bolton. And you were able to implement all the clean in place system and reuse water, and seeing that coming to life was somehow, you know, when you study something which is only on paper and then you it has a lot of benefits. And moving to what Robert was saying is, Rob, it comes from a company that has been around for several generations in a very traditional culture, but the Symingtons were able also to be disruptive, and they have a brand, table wine, that it actually shifts somehow the way that people will understand organic wine. And Altano, which is the name of this wine, actually was a groundbreaker in terms of the scene, the wine scene in the Douro. How was the market, the international markets? How did the international markets receive this?
So Altano's been around for 20 years. Everyone who's watching, for hundreds of years, the Douro was only port, and then a new generation of winemakers in the 90s. There were one or two before that, but really it was 90s, and the last 20 years have been producing wine, because there's a limited amount of port you can produce, and you have the rest of the grapes. And eventually people said, well, this is amazing fruit, we need to make some interesting wines with it. So Altano's been part of this pioneering generation of new wines. It's an everyday wine, it's not super premium. And the organic Altano, probably in literally the last 3 years in the export markets, has started seeing real interest. Markets like UK, where it's listed in Waitrose, Scandinavia, Canada, Switzerland. And so I think we're part of a trend. I mean, Portuguese wine is a tiny dot in the export market. But the fact that it's organic, the fact that it has B Corp on the back label, I think is really helping us engage with consumers who prioritize these kinds of things. The next challenge for us, and we're not allowed to do this with port, is bottles. And I know Porto Protocol had a debate about packaging, but,
which was quite a challenge.
Yeah. So, you know, I want to see us exploring other formats. Altano would be a brand to do that with. 90% of our carbon footprint is in the bottle and the transportation, as Haley said. So, you know, as an industry, this is an area, whether or not we do it ourselves, or eventually the carbon taxes get so high that our bottles get so expensive that we choose other formats, our generation is going to have to solve that challenge as well, I think. Perfect.
And taking the question that I was asking Franz and Haley, if you are a pioneer in B Corp, what would you say to another Portuguese company that they will say, we don't have the same dimension, we don't have the same volume, you know, people have been working like this forever, it's really difficult to change. What would you say to them?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of the best sustainable practices you see in Portugal is from the smaller operators, because they can do things maybe more hands-on than scale. I think the argument that the consumer wants it is a pretty powerful one, because at the end of the day, most wine companies are businesses. So, but also most people are in wine because they love the place that they produce the wine. They want to protect it. And so if you're really trying to persuade someone, you talk about the implications of what we might be facing in 30 years' time. I have 2 little girls, they're 4 and 2. And we all love the places that we produce our wine, and it's in our instinct to want to protect them. So, you know, but I don't find there's much skepticism these days. I think, and when as a system, as an economy, we can all shift, because a wine company can only do so much innovation until the economy within which we operate also shifts. I think it's all happening. We just have to make sure it happens quickly enough.
That's it. That's it. So just before, I don't know if you want to share any topic to, this is not really a discussion because we agree on everything. It's just a matter of, you know, adapting to our own reality.
Yeah, well, I would just like to add something to the argument Rob said. I believe that in our situation, we as a small winery, it is true we operate in a system, but being part of an association like the VDP, or being part of an association like the Respect Winery, there are certain possibilities also to tackle the system. For example, if we talk about bottles, I mean, we need 100,000 bottles, which is probably, in terms of the economy or the scale, is very little. But if we take a look at the whole VDP, that's a different question. There's a possibility of a cooperation that we address the producers of bottles and tell them what we need, and ask them for a reduction of glass and therefore CO2, and produce a lightweight bottle. And that's just one example of many things that even small companies can do if they organize themselves.
Absolutely. So just before I pass on the word to Marta, could you name three topics that you feel that will make the difference to deliver your company to the next generation? This and that. Who wants to start?
I can start.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go back a little bit to what I started with, which is measure everything that you can and do it often. So if you can, continue to measure your carbon footprint, business carbon footprint. That data, create goals that are challenging but achievable. It can seem overwhelming, I think, sometimes, given what we're told we're going to face and what we experience today. But I think as long as the goals that you set as a company are achievable, then I think that can help reduce that feeling of just it being completely overwhelming and an issue that you can't make a huge impact on. The other thing I would say is, attempt certification, maintain those certifications. Don't get a certification and then forget about it, and don't ever stop improving. That's a motto of ours, is that we're always improving every year, not just in wine and in wine quality, but also in sustainability. And sustainability is not a good things, but there's always more that you can do.
Perfect. Thank you, Ailey. Franz.
Well, ecologically, probably be close to your vines. Don't do everything you're allowed to do. Be aware of the consequences. Economically speaking, focus on what you're doing best. it can be grape varieties, styles of wines, whatsoever, and socially be close to the people that you work with, because they're going to stick to you when times become tough, and they're going to be there when everything is great.
Perfect. Rob.
Thanks. I would echo what Haley said about certifications and goals. We've published a series of public goals called Mission 2025, which no one obliged us to do. And sometimes we regret doing it because they're ambitious goals, but we're putting our feet to the fire. In terms of future generations, my daughters, 3 things. One is, as a B Corp, we have now changed our company statutes to put social and environmental factors on the same level as financial, and directors are legally obliged to prioritize these issues. So I think that is a way of protecting this for future generations. The second thing is that we are committed to leading the decarbonization of the wine sector in terms of, we joined an association called formed last year at the Climate Change Leadership Conference. So, Portugal as a country is committed to carbon zero by 2050. If we can get there before, that's our goal, but certainly we're going to try and innovate as much as we can to reduce that carbon footprint to zero, because that's what the science says we need to do. Ultimately, we're reliant on things outside of our control, but we're going to do our best. And the third point I'd make is, to tell you very briefly about a study that we're doing. It's a multi-year study on indigenous grape varieties in the Douro. So the idea here is that in the past, farmers were using varieties that were very well adapted to drought and high temperatures. And maybe these varieties aren't being used so much because they don't have the yields of some of the more popular ones. So if I can give any gift to my daughters, because they are likely to have to operate in a more challenging world than we are, it would be to say, hey, we found out that these 5 varieties that no one was using are actually really well adapted to climate change. You can thank me when you're older. So hopefully that will be a nice tangible, that's about adaptation, right? But I think that's important too.
Perfect. Thank you so much. What I find fascinating about, the wine world is that we are, in different time zones, but we are sharing the same thoughts and we have the same goals for the future. And I think that's what's the most exciting about, this new generation. And if we, in our daily lives, will take some of this to take home messages into our routines, I think, we will be on the right track. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to pass on to Marta. Marta, when you want to jump into.
I'm back. Thank you everyone for all your inputs. I'll start with that. First, let me apologize once again to everyone that wanted to be live on this talk and come. So hopefully you'll enjoy as much watching the talk at your own pace and time. Now, each of you, I would love to thank you. I'm going to start with words from Franz, because I actually learned German today, because I learned that sustainable in German means prepare for the future. And I think I've never heard such a more assertive and beautiful way to define sustainability. So it was wonderful. I never thought that besides Weinheim, I would learn something else in German today. Also, on the words of Rob, saying that especially in wine, when you have a family business, it's very easy to have a long-term vision. And I think that might make it easier for everyone out there to follow this path of a more sustainable business, because most of you are indeed in a family business. And it was interesting, especially today, that you're representing a new generation, that you said you were going to find a company that was more in the 80s, and you found a much more forward-thinking mindset, and that was quite interesting. Everything you said, from Haley, the fact that you try to educate consumers, not necessarily in a proactive way, but in the touch point you have, because you have sustainability in your DNA. So you try to, every touch point you have with your consumer, you try the way that you said that climate change can be indeed overwhelming. So suggesting that we have goals, continuous improvement, and certification. The fact that you mentioned certification and that Rob mentioned as well, is quite important, because from all the conversations we've had with our members, we feel that certification sometimes is something that is considered a good step. In others, it's not. But I think the arguments you mentioned are quite good in people wanting to go ahead with certification, may it be sustainability or biodynamics or organic. Regardless, it's a way of setting goals as an organization. There was so much more. I love, actually, we've been speaking a lot with, was telling that to Franz, with many biodynamic producers. And as you said, it's in a way, as your father wanted, that's a way of not manipulating nature, and that has everything to do with the topic that brought us here in the first place, which was climate change and climate solutions. And as you say, still, Franz, a winery that touched on sustainability in every way is your way of thinking the winery anyway. I'm sure you've said much more, but and a thing that again has to do with your generation, and going back to Rob's words, you actually used one of the brands that is my favorite, which is Patagonia. That voting with your money is the best way that we can act sustainably in our everyday life. And I think that message is absolutely key. So dear all out there that are going to watch this, this talk, I hope you are inspired by these youngsters that are here, not only representing wine and new generations, but they have embraced their family business and this idea of having a long vision and thinking of preparing for the future. Has sustainability means in German. I think it's the best way, and I do hope that you feel inspired to follow this path. So thank you all. Apologies for not being able to be live and being able to have your answers. I hope that you can forward your questions to Porto Protocol, and then we'll forward them to our speakers and to Beatriz. We will continue with our climate talks. We've had amazing feedback, and so we will continue, not on a weekly basis, we'll continue on a monthly basis, happening on the third Wednesday every month from now onwards until the end of the year. The next talk will be on the third Wednesday of June, on the 17th, if I'm not wrong, and we will focus on renewable energies. But stay, Beatriz, for moderating these youngsters. Rob, Haley, and Franz, thank you so much for being here with us today. And thank you all for listening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.